Hi, we're here with Vajra mom. Vajra has been a tantric dance of power teacher for close to 20 years. And she has a book that's coming out recently called From a Hidden Stream, The Natural Spiritual Authority of Women. So we'll talk to Vajra today about the various works and accomplishments that she has done, and also this further inquiry into the divine feminine and authority. We are a microcosm of the greater macrocosm.
Yeah.
Now, how does that tie into authority?
Authority, the word author means to create.
Mm-hmm.
So if you author something, you have authority. The words are connected.
Mm-hmm.
But you not only have authority, you have responsibility. And so when I look at a woman, her authority, her spiritual authority is natural because we give birth. And the natural thing is to take care of that child. You're responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you must feed it. From our bodies we can feed it.
Mm-hmm.
And you must teach it. You must protect it.
Mm-hmm.
And you must teach the child and guide the child. And you see that in the natural kingdom. You see lioness mothers or cub mothers,
Mm-hmm.
doing all of that. But as a human being, we have the added responsibility to guide the emotional experience of the child, the human dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
Emotions and the psychology, you might call it, the mental processes, and the spiritual. And the spiritual is inseparable from the physical, from how we live, from the culture, from the mores, from the structures, because it's based, our whole society, all societal structures are based in the spiritual questions of what am I, why am I here,
Mm-hmm.
what is life about,
Yeah.
what's the purpose?
Right. We definitely want to go into the spiritual dimensions more. Now, I have a feeling that when you're talking about the taking care of the emotional sides, the spiritual dimensions of a child, this child is not just your own child. Is that correct? And how are you really looking at the child? You're looking at, women treating many others as their children, or an approach.
Right. The child, I believe in reincarnation. I believe a child comes in. We know that children come in with their own personality
Mm-hmm.
and tendencies. So it's like a sacred trust. Here is this soul, this being that has come through my body, and I'm responsible to help that one unfold according to its path. So in that sense, the child is not ours. We don't own it.
Mm-hmm.
It has that being, that person has its own path.
Okay.
And then in the same way, when we talk about grandmother, the word grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
When a woman stops giving her own birth and her daughter gives birth, she becomes the grandmother. She expands naturally her love, her domain to the people at large, you might say. I mean, that's sort of a traditional, indigenous understanding of an older woman.
Yeah.
And we need to restore that.
Give us a personal story, if you will, of how you came to experience this.
The which, experience which?
The experience of your child and taking care of the multi-dimensions and the domains of the child.
Well, for me, I'm not a physical mother.
Mm-hmm.
I have not had children. But as I do this practice of the tantric dance of feminine power, and I go into that heart of compassion, and I bring my own, as my own capacity for expansion, for compassion expands, that naturally extends to everything around me.
Mm-hmm.
Motherhood, in its ultimate sense, is divine love.
Mm-hmm.
So, though I have not personally had the experience of holding that baby, giving birth and holding that baby and raising a child, through my own experience, my spiritual experiences, my prayer, my dance of compassion, I have expanded to feel responsible for everything that comes across my path,
Mm-hmm.
and to feel that love of motherhood that is universal,
Yes.
and that men can feel.
Right. Yes.
I mean, men come from women.
Mm-hmm.
The male is created out of the female. He's a part of her.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we are a part of the Great Mother. You know, the plants, the animals, everything's a part of the Great Mother, the Creator. If someone wants to think of it as a male, okay, but it makes more sense to me it's a female, because we see the female giving birth, right?
Right. Yes.
So, and there's something about calling divinity a mother that touches us in a place that is way beyond words and just speaks to the core of our longing and our desire and our experience of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's quite beautiful. I mean, really, that women to claim the natural power of motherhood, and hence seeing all that she comes across as her children and feeling responsible for them out of compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially what you're describing. But now go into the how of it, especially then using, spiritual practices.
The how that for me is to really dwell in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, we know now from transplants that people get, they get a liver or they get a heart from somebody, and things change in their body.
Mm-hmm.
Because that person had good rhythm and they could dance, so you get their heart, or you get their liver and you're not as angry as you used to be because that person wasn't angry. And that's where you hold anger. So the same, we really understand that phenomenon now, that each organ
Mm-hmm.
contains an intelligence
Memory.
and memory, and each organ in each different person's body. So you think about the womb, and encoded in the womb is the power of creation.
Mm-hmm.
To take spirit and create a body. So woman has that in her body. So the womb is intelligent. If we drop down into that and we dwell in that and we open to that and we surrender to the body, to that intelligence, and invite it to move through us and welcome it in the pleasure streams and the pleasurable sensation of the body with a devotional reverence, it wakes up the deep knowing.
Mm-hmm.
That's beyond words. It wakes up the compassion. It wakes up the connection with everything.
Right.
The creative power, the feminine power, the Shakti,
Right.
the animating power of the universe. So,
Yeah. You're using wakes up this natural authority in women. It sounds as if we've been asleep.
well, we've been oppressed, right? We've been dominated. We're living in a society that, and most religions around the world see the supreme being as male. And that gives man the mandate, and it's been abused, man the mandate to dominate woman and dominate the earth, have ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, that's why I say women's spiritual authority is natural.
Mm-hmm.
Because culture, original culture and art and textiles and language and even agriculture grew out of women invented it,
Mm-hmm.
women created it, and it came out of her natural love and nurturance of her children.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give birth to something and you create it, whether it's a child or it's the art or the knowledge that's coming through about how to plant seeds and that sort of thing, there's a natural spiritual authority connected to that,
Mm-hmm.
and responsibility.
Right.
So, I was on the path, the goddess path, for 20 years, Jean, before I even put together those words, woman's natural spiritual authority.
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard female spiritual authority, and of course, that's the core of the women's movement.
Mm-hmm.
Spirituality movement is claiming spiritual authority. But when I put the word natural to it,
Mm-hmm.
a whole cascade of understandings started happening.
Mm-hmm.
This was the original authority,
Mm-hmm.
the original creativity, and it came from women's menses, their blood,
Mm-hmm.
when that descent every month into the dream time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a power, that's the original shamanic descent. Women were the original shamans.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of evidence of that now. And so by women coming together and bleeding in sync, as you do if you're living together, we know that even today, if you live in the same house, you start bleeding together, or the same monastery or whatever.
Yeah, and trained.
And trained. And you bleed together, and the veil between dimensions is thinner. We're much more psychically aware. We're in dream time. We're sensitive. And you come together as women in that state, and you can bring through vision and guidance for the people. You bring through the wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so in that sense, we're the spiritual creators. We're the natural priestesses and shamans.
How would this natural women's spiritual authority actually manifest?
Fantastic question, because it is manifesting around the world. This is what's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinary women, women without credentials or degrees. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take any kind of a bonk on the head. Lema Bowie in Liberia helped, that she founded the Mass Action for Peace, Liberian women, and they were largely responsible for ending the civil war in Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
And she had she's a Methodist, I believe a Methodist, she's Christian, African
Mm-hmm.
Christian. She had a silly dream, to gather the women and pray to end the war. And she thought, well, that's, what's that going to do?
Mm-hmm.
But she told women about it, and that came from a natural authority. Natural, just
Mm-hmm.
she had a guidance, and the women said, yes, let's do that. And she said, well, who's going to organize it? And they said, you are. She goes, no, not me, I'm not worthy. She didn't feel worthy.
Right.
But she was given the dream, and she told it, and so she organized it. And the women chanted and sang and danced. And Charles Taylor, the warlord, would have to drive by them every day. He hated it, seeing them chanting and singing and dancing for peace. And then they went out with their peace signs. And she said, Lema Bowie said, we were all over them. Wherever they were, we were. And they would link arms. Woman's natural spiritual authority. Woman is a collective. And they would link arms in front of the military. They demanded truce negotiations. There's a whole story. There's a really phenomenal
Mm-hmm.
story of how they made that happen,
Mm-hmm.
that peace happen. And then there's Sampat Pal Devi in India, a poor woman with 5 kids who was married off at age 11, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And she got tired of seeing the women being beaten and women not educated and the outcasts, the untouchables.
Mm-hmm.
She gathered the women together with their lati sticks, their traditional walking sticks. They all wore hot pink saris. The Gulabi gang, Gulabi
Mm-hmm.
means pink.
Mm-hmm.
And they organized as a group their natural spiritual authority. And they said to the men, stop beating that wife. Stop beating your wife. And they would beat him if he didn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
They only used violence if they had to. But they asserted their, natural spiritual authority protects life.
Mm-hmm.
It acts instinctually. It acts creatively. Right? She didn't need a bureaucracy. She didn't need funding. She didn't need grants.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't need any kind of credentials. She acted from her natural protection as a mother, as a woman, and she gathered the women together like Lema Bowie did in Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean by natural spiritual authority.
Mm-hmm.
And on a personal level, a woman can, if it's natural, it can't be taken away from you. It's right there. That's why I call it a hidden stream. It's just under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Scratch a little bit and there it is. It's inside, and it's a knowing. And a woman in her own home, if she can sit with that, the man, she's with a man, a male companion, a husband, if he can see her as the natural spiritual authority. The ancient word for wife in Sanskrit meant she who guides her husband on the path of righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
So this has a history. This is not something I'm making up. It has a historical reality and a biological reality. And women feel it. So a woman can stand in that natural spiritual authority as an individual, and we must collect together en masse and assert it as woman, all women together. And in fact, we are the only ones that can do it. I mean, we must change humanity around. We must bring us back into right relationship. Woman must do it, and we do it by ending the division between us. We've been divided into separate houses, nuclear families. We've been divided from our own bodies. You know, our blood is, oh, we don't want to do that. You know, we want to hide it. The female shamanic group, you know, we need to revive that. And it's all in the service of love and life. Woman doesn't dominate. You know, woman wants to include, because I think the Z Budapest that coined the feminist term, is only two kinds of people in the world. Mothers and their children. You know, that includes all of us, right? The family of humanity. So, and the other group I wanted to mention that's asserting their natural spiritual authorities are 13 indigenous grandmothers. Yeah. And they were brought together by Jyoti, a woman who was kind of getting the vision of the grandmothers forming. She didn't know what it meant. How do I make this happen? And her inner voice said, follow relationship. Start with relationship, and it'll unfold from there. And that's what natural spiritual authority is about. It's about relationship. It's always about relationship. Not isolation and I'm above you, but relationship. And it's about what real power is. Judy Grahn, in one of her articles, wrote about, that's when I first understood the difference between power and force. An apple tree. You can have an apple tree, and you can dry it up and kill it that way. You can fence it. You can chop it down. You know, but you can't create an apple. All the other is force, but the tree has the power to create an apple. And that's power. And woman has the power to create life and nurture it with an intelligence that is innate. You know, woman as a collective and woman individually. So that's power.
Yeah. The power of birth is much greater than the force of death. That is absolutely true, and now it's very encouraging and very inspiring, of course, to know and hear about all of these exciting things that are going on around the world. What would you like to say, finally, as some, in our last minutes together, for the next steps, or some advice for the women who are hearing you in waking up to this natural authority?
I would say it's all internal, it's innate. So sit down and be still and let the breath come all the way down into your womb. Maybe just put your hands on your womb and honor your womb and begin to invite that intelligence to have dominion. No, that's not the right word. That's a biblical term. To breathe. Okay, to breathe and to guide. Come to it as the channel that it is. And bring that, if you meditate, bring that into your meditation. And then what I do from there is let it begin to move the body. You know, but begin with rooting in the source of power and the source of our natural spiritual authority, which is this power to create, and the intelligence that's encoded right here. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Vajra. Now, what about for the viewers who would like to read your website or your book? How would they contact you?
Yeah, www.greatgoddess.org.